All right, so you think you know trucks. Think again. We're going deep today into the world of semi-trucks here in America, pulling some insights from a CNBC video all about them. Get ready for some surprising facts, a glimpse into the future, and maybe even some drama.
Oh yeah, a little drama along the way.
Our deep dive today is fueled by a CNBC YouTube video called Who Makes America's Semi-Trucks? It takes us inside a Freightliner factory, talks to industry experts, explores challenges, innovations, all that.
I love those factory tours.
And you too.
They're so cool.
So you might be thinking, why should I care about semi-trucks?
Right.
Well, they're the unsung heroes of our economy.
Absolutely.
Everything you buy, everything you eat, everything you wear, it's all been on a truck at some point.
I never thought of it that way.
Right. And this industry is on the verge of a major transformation.
Oh, tell me more.
Think electric trucks, self-driving trucks. It's way more exciting than you might think.
So much going on.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with who actually builds these behemoths. We learned that Freightliner, which is owned by Daimler Trucks, dominates the market, controls a whopping 40% of it.
The undisputed king of the road right now. It's a much more diverse landscape than you might think, though. We also have Western Star, another Daimler brand. Then there's PACCAR with their iconic Peterbilt trucks. Navistar's in the mix, now part of the Volkswagen Group. And of course, Volvo Trucks, which also owns Mack.
Wow, there's a lot.
A lot of players.
So it's not just a one-horse race.
Definitely not.
Each of these companies has its own kind of strategy's own focus.
Right, absolutely.
The video mentions, for instance, that Freightliner offers over 3,000 shades of white paint.
The 3,000.
3,000.
Wow.
And that speaks to, I think, a key insight here. You know, it's not just about functionality.
Sure.
Semi-trucks are highly customized, reflecting the needs of both, like individual owner-operators and large fleets.
Makes sense.
These trucks are more than just vehicles. They're businesses on wheels,
Yeah.
sometimes even homes on the road.
Yeah, like a house on wheels.
And speaking of investments, the video did not shy away from the price tag. An average semi with a sleeper cab can set you back about $150,000.
Oh, wow.
But if you go all out, you're looking at upwards of $200,000.
That's a hefty chunk of change for sure. And you know what's interesting? The pandemic actually threw a wrench into the used truck market. Before COVID, a 4-year-old truck might have gone for around $50,000, but demand surged during the pandemic, driving prices up to over $110,000 for a used truck.
Wow. Talk about supply and demand in action.
Oh, yeah.
But it really underscores how essential trucking became during that time, right?
Absolutely. And it also raises a question about the long-term effects on the market, right? Those inflated prices might have encouraged some owners to sell, potentially leading to an oversupply down the line and impacting new truck sales. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Right, great point. Okay, so we've got this backdrop of a changing market, and then the video throws in the future of trucking, electric trucks. Freightliner's already delivering its e-Cascadia, an electric version of their popular model. Are we all going to be seeing silent semis on the highway soon?
Well, the transition to electric is definitely gaining momentum, but it's not without its challenges. The video highlighted the weight issue. Those batteries, they're heavy.
Yeah.
And that directly impacts how much cargo a truck can haul.
Right, and in an industry where every pound matters, that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's not just about having enough range to cover long hauls. It's about finding that balance between battery weight, cargo capacity, and the cost of operating an electric truck versus a diesel one. And let's not forget about the charging infrastructure. Building out a network of charging stations that can handle these massive trucks is a huge, huge undertaking.
Yeah, huge. So maybe long-haul electric trucking is still a way off, but what about shorter routes, like deliveries within cities? Would those be better suited for electric trucks?
That's where things get interesting. Short-haul trucking might be a more viable early application for electric trucks because the range requirements are less demanding and charging infrastructure within cities is generally more developed. But even then, there are challenges. Think about things like delivery time windows and the need for quick turnaround times. Charging can still be a bottleneck.
Okay, so electric trucking's facing some hurdles, but the video also mentioned another contender, hydrogen fuel cells.
Yeah.
They say filling up a hydrogen tank is much quicker than charging a battery. So maybe that's the answer.
Hydrogen certainly has the potential to address some of the limitations of electric trucks, especially when it comes to refueling time. Imagine a truck being able to fill up with hydrogen in minutes instead of waiting hours to charge. That could be a game changer for certain types of hauls.
Yeah, time is money in this business, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
But then we're talking about building a whole new infrastructure for hydrogen production and distribution, right? And the trucking industry is notoriously risk-averse. They operate on thin profit margins and rely on proven technologies. Remember what happened when Navistar tried to introduce a new emissions-reducing technology back in 2009? Know what happened?
Well, the technology didn't work as expected, and it ended up costing Navistar billions of dollars in losses and legal battles. So you can see why trucking companies are hesitant to jump on board with unproven technologies, even if they offer potential benefits.
It's understandable. They need to be sure that any investment they make will pay off.
Absolutely.
But this hydrogen thing is intriguing. Is it a viable option, or is it just hype?
That's the million-dollar question, right? On the one hand, hydrogen offers faster refueling times and potentially longer range compared to batteries. But on the other hand, the infrastructure is practically non-existent, and the cost of producing and distributing hydrogen is still quite high.
So it's a trade-off, just like with electric trucks. There's no easy answer.
Exactly. And it's important to note that the video presents both sides of the argument, highlighting the potential of hydrogen, while also acknowledging the skepticism from some industry analysts.
Okay, so we've got electric trucks battling it out with hydrogen fuel cells. But the video didn't stop there. It also threw self-driving trucks into the mix.
Yes. Autonomous trucks. The technology that promises to revolutionize the industry, but also raises a lot of eyebrows.
From what I gathered, it's not just science fiction anymore. Companies are pouring money into developing this technology, and some are even predicting that we'll see early-stage autonomous trucks on the roads within the next year or two.
That's right.
And the potential benefits are huge. The video points out that driver costs account for a significant portion of a trucking company's expenses. So eliminating the driver could drastically reduce costs and potentially lead to faster delivery times.
Sure, but I can only imagine the regulatory hurdles and safety concerns that come with driverless trucks, right?
You're absolutely right. We're talking about massive vehicles sharing the road with regular cars and pedestrians.
Yeah.
And then there are the ethical questions surrounding accidents and liability. Who's responsible when a self-driving truck makes a mistake?
Those are tough questions that need to be answered before we see widespread adoption of autonomous trucks, right? It's not just about the technology, it's about public perception and trust as well.
Exactly. And then there's the question of what happens to all the truck drivers.
Right.
It's a major source of employment. And automating those jobs could have significant societal impacts.
Right.
So it's not as simple as just rolling out the technology and letting the trucks drive themselves.
Right.
There's a whole web of economic, social, and ethical considerations that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. And this is where the video really shines. It doesn't just present the technology as a silver bullet, it delves into the complexities and challenges that come with it.
Good reminder that technological advancements always have ripple effects.
Always.
Positive and negative. And we need to approach them thoughtfully and consider the wider implications.
I agree.
Well, that brings us to another key insight from the video. The razor-thin profit margins the trucking companies operate on.
Right.
They mentioned it's typically in the single digits.
It's thin.
So they're making just a few cents on every dollar of revenue.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which explains why they're so hesitant to adopt new technologies, even if they offer long-term benefits.
Right.
They need to be absolutely sure that any investment they make will pay off and that the technology is reliable and proven.
Exactly.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
It is.
It's fascinating to see how all these factors, technology, economics, even public perception, are all shaping the future of the trucking industry.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, so we've talked about the players, the costs, the market forces, and the future tech on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
But the video also takes us inside a Freightliner factory. And I have to say, that was pretty impressive.
Oh, that factory tour was amazing.
Yeah.
Seeing those massive trucks being assembled piece by piece was really something else.
I know, right? It's like watching a well-oiled machine in action. And did you catch how often a new truck rolls off the line? Almost every 10 minutes?
It's incredible.
Incredible. And they mentioned that each truck is custom built according to the customer's specifications. They offer tens of thousands of options. Everything from engine size and cab configuration to interior finishes and paint colors.
Wow.
It really is like building a house on wheels. But the video also pointed out that while some truckers go all out with customization, especially owner-operators, the majority of truck purchases are made by large fleets, and they tend to prioritize different things.
Right. For large fleets, it's all about efficiency and maximizing their bottom line. They're focused on fuel economy and reducing operating costs, which is why you see a lot of aerodynamic designs in their fleets.
Aerodynamic designs, I'm not sure I understand what that means.
It's all about reducing drag the resistance the truck encounters as it moves through the air. By designing trucks with smoother lines and rounded edges, they can slip through the air more easily, which translates into better fuel efficiency and lower fuel costs.
So it's not just about looking cool, it's about saving money in the long run.
Exactly. Every little bit counts when you're operating on thin margins. And speaking of different types of trucking companies, the video highlighted the two main categories: fleets and owner-operators.
Right. The fleets are the big players buying multiple trucks, sometimes even hundreds or thousands at a time.
Right.
And then you have the owner-operators, who are more like independent contractors, often owning and driving their own rigs.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic. Fleets have the advantage of scale and buying power, but they also face more regulations and competition. Owner-operators have more flexibility and control over their work, but they often have to hustle harder to secure contracts and manage their expenses.
Yeah, it's like any other industry, really.
Yeah.
You have the big corporations and the small businesses, each trying to find their niche and make a profit. But the video didn't sugarcoat the realities of the trucking business. It's tough out there.
It is. Trucking is a cyclical business, and demand can fluctuate depending on the overall economy, consumer spending, even things like fuel prices and weather patterns. It's not for the faint of heart.
So it's not a very stable industry.
It can be quite volatile, actually. And with all the changes on the horizon, from alternative fuels to automation, the trucking industry is facing a period of significant disruption.
Which makes it all the more important to understand the forces at play.
Absolutely. And that's what we're aiming to do in this deep dive, right? We're taking a closer look at the industry, from its current state to the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about the companies, the costs, the market dynamics, and the future technologies that are poised to reshape the industry. But there's one crucial aspect we haven't touched on yet: the human side of trucking. We can't forget about the truck drivers themselves, the people who are out there on the roads day in and day out, keeping our supply chains moving.
Right.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into the lives of these essential workers, exploring the challenges they face, the impact of automation, and the importance of ensuring their well-being as the industry evolves. So stay tuned.
Can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of semi-trucks. We've covered a lot of ground already, from the nuts and bolts of truck manufacturing to the economic forces kind of shaping the industry. But now it's time to shift gears a little bit and talk about the people behind the wheel, the truck drivers themselves.
You're right, we can't forget about the human element in all of this. These are the folks who spend countless hours on the road, often away from their families, facing all sorts of challenges to keep those goods moving. It's a demanding job, both physically and mentally.
Absolutely, and the video we're discussing today actually touches on this, highlighting the potential impact of automation on truck drivers.
Yeah.
As self-driving trucks become more sophisticated, there's a real concern about job displacement.
That's a valid concern, and it's something that needs to be addressed proactively. We can't just blindly embrace these technological advancements without considering the human consequences. Think about it. Truck driving is a major source of employment, and automating those jobs could have ripple effects throughout the economy and society.
So what can be done? Is there a way to transition, those whose livelihoods might be affected by automation?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Some experts suggest retraining programs, maybe for new roles within the industry, or even opportunities in other sectors. Maybe there's a role for former truck drivers in managing or maintaining these autonomous fleets.
Yeah, or perhaps in logistics or supply chain management, leveraging their on-the-road experience.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that no one is left behind as the industry evolves.
Okay, so automation is one big challenge on the horizon. But even in the present day, truck drivers face a lot of difficulties that many people might not even consider. The video touched on the long hours they work and the time spent away from home, which can't be easy.
It's definitely not a 9-to-5 job. These drivers are often on the road for days or even weeks at a time, dealing with tight deadlines, demanding schedules, and that can take a toll on their physical and mental health, as well as their relationships with family and friends.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I thought truck drivers just drove. But after researching this, I realized it's so much more than that. It's like running a small business.
That's a great point. They're not just drivers, they're also responsible for maintaining their rigs, managing their logs, navigating traffic, dealing with unexpected situations on the road. It's a lot to handle.
And let's not forget about the safety concerns.
Right.
Driving a massive truck, especially in challenging conditions, is inherently risky.
Absolutely. They have to be constantly vigilant, aware of their surroundings, and able to react quickly to changing conditions. And then there's the issue of fatigue, which can be a major factor in accidents. Long hours on the road can take a toll, and it's important for drivers to prioritize their rest and well-being.
So it's a tough job, no doubt about it. And I think we as consumers need to be more aware of the sacrifices these drivers make to keep our shelves stocked and our economy running.
I couldn't agree more. Next time you see a truck on the highway, take a moment to appreciate the person behind the wheel. They're playing a vital role in our lives, even if we don't always see it.
Well said.
Hey.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but let's also acknowledge the skill and expertise required to be a truck driver. It's not something just anyone can do.
You're right. It takes a lot of training and experience to handle these big rigs safely and efficiently. They need to know how to maneuver in tight spaces, back up with precision, handle different types of cargo.
And let's not forget about the regulations they have to comply with. There's a whole web of rules and regulations governing the trucking industry, from hours of service to weight limits.
It's a highly regulated industry, and for good reason. Safety is paramount, and those regulations are in place to protect both the drivers and the public.
Okay, so we've established that truck driving is a challenging but essential job, and that the workforce is facing potential disruptions from automation. But what about the industry itself? How is it adapting to the changing world around us, especially when it comes to sustainability?
That's a great question, and it's one that's top of mind for many industry leaders. Trucking is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, so finding ways to reduce its environmental impact is crucial.
Right, we talked about electric and hydrogen trucks earlier, but are there other ways the industry is trying to become more eco-friendly?
Absolutely. One area of focus is improving fuel efficiency. We already mentioned aerodynamic designs, but there are other strategies like using low rolling resistance tires and optimizing engine performance.
So it's about getting the most mileage out of every gallon of fuel.
Precisely. And that not only reduces emissions, but also saves trucking companies money, which is always a good thing. But there are also efforts to explore alternative fuels beyond electric and hydrogen.
Like what?
There's biodiesel, which is made from renewable sources like vegetable oils and animal fats. And there's also natural gas, which burns cleaner than diesel. But each of these alternatives has its own pros and cons.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution?
Definitely not. The best approach will likely involve a combination of different strategies tailored to the specific needs and circumstances of each trucking company. And it'll require collaboration between industry stakeholders, government agencies, researchers to develop and implement these solutions effectively.
Okay, so fuel efficiency and alternative fuels are key areas of focus. But what about the trucks themselves? Are there any innovations in design or materials that can contribute to sustainability?
That's another area where we're seeing progress. Some manufacturers are experimenting with lighter weight materials to reduce the overall weight of the trucks, which can improve fuel efficiency. And there's also research into using recycled materials in truck construction.
So it's about thinking about the entire life cycle of the truck, from the materials used to its end-of-life disposal.
Exactly. And it's not just about the environmental impact, it's also about the economic benefits. By reducing waste and using resources more efficiently, trucking companies can save money and improve their bottom line.
So it's a win-win situation, good for the environment and good for business. But let's go back to the human element for a moment. We talked about the challenges that truck drivers face, but what about the opportunities? Are there ways to make this job more appealing and rewarding?
That's an important question, especially with the driver shortage the industry is currently facing. One way to make the job more attractive is to improve working conditions, offering better pay, benefits, and more predictable schedules.
That makes sense. If you want to attract and retain qualified drivers, you need to make the job worth their while.
Exactly. And it's not just about the compensation, it's also about the quality of life. Providing drivers with better amenities on the road, such as comfortable sleeper cabs and access to healthy food options, can go a long way in improving their overall well-being.
And what about technology? Can technology be used to make the job easier and safer for drivers?
Absolutely. We already talked about some of the driver assist features that are becoming increasingly common, such as lane departure warnings and automatic emergency braking. These technologies can help reduce driver fatigue and prevent accidents.
And what about things like GPS navigation and electronic logging devices?
Those are also making a big difference. GPS navigation helps drivers plan their routes more efficiently and avoid traffic delays, while electronic logging devices simplify the process of tracking hours of service, making it easier for drivers to comply with regulations.
So technology can be a valuable tool for improving both the safety and the efficiency of the trucking industry.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how it's implemented and how drivers are trained to use it effectively.
Right. Technology can be a great asset, but it's important to remember that it's just a tool. The human element is still crucial, and it's the drivers who are ultimately responsible for operating those trucks safely and responsibly.
Well said. And speaking of safety, I think it's worth highlighting some of the initiatives that are underway to make the trucking industry safer.
Okay, what are some of those initiatives?
Well, there's a lot of focus on driver training and education, emphasizing things like defensive driving techniques, fatigue management, and cargo securement.
Makes sense. Investing in driver training can go a long way in preventing accidents.
Exactly. And there are also efforts to improve road safety through infrastructure improvements, such as adding rumble strips to highways and installing more truck parking areas to reduce driver fatigue.
So it's a multifaceted approach, addressing safety from multiple angles.
Exactly. And it requires collaboration between government agencies, trucking companies, and drivers themselves. Everyone has a role to play in making the roads safer.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this segment. We've talked about the challenges and opportunities facing truck drivers, the impact of automation, the importance of sustainability, and the initiatives underway to improve safety. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think it's worth taking a step back and reflecting on the broader significance of the trucking industry.
I agree. It's easy to overlook the importance of this industry, but it truly is the backbone of our economy.
Everything we use, everything we eat, everything we wear, it's all been on a truck at some point in its journey.
And it's not just about moving goods within our own country. Trucking plays a vital role in international trade as well.
Right. Think about all the products that are imported and exported every day. Trucks are essential for getting those goods to and from ports and across borders.
Exactly. So the next time you see a truck on the road, take a moment to appreciate the role it plays in our interconnected world.
It's a reminder that even something as seemingly mundane as a truck is connected to a much larger web of people, businesses, and global commerce.
And as we've discussed in this deep dive, that web is constantly evolving, facing new challenges and opportunities.
It's a dynamic and fascinating industry, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But for now, we'll take a pause here. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive with some final thoughts on the future of trucking and what it all means for you, the listener. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring the world of semi-trucks, haven't we? From the factories where they're built to the drivers who keep them rolling, it's clear this industry is way more complex and fascinating than most people realize.
It really is. And as we've discussed, the trucking industry is kind of at a crossroads, facing these pressures to become more efficient, more sustainable, and technologically advanced, all while navigating challenges related to its workforce and the well-being of its drivers.
Right. It's like this balancing act between embracing innovation and making sure that no one gets left behind in the process.
Absolutely.
But before we get too deep into the future, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the cyclical nature of the trucking business.
Right.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. Trucking is very much influenced by the overall economy. So when consumer spending is high and businesses are booming, there's a greater demand for goods to be shipped, which means more work for trucking companies.
Okay.
But when the economy slows down, so does that demand for trucking services.
So it's kind of like a roller coaster ride.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are ups and downs, and trucking companies need to be prepared to weather those fluctuations.
Exactly. They need to be adaptable and able to adjust their strategies based on market conditions.
Makes sense.
For example, during the pandemic, we saw a surge in demand for trucking services as online shopping skyrocketed and supply chains were disrupted. But as things started to normalize, demand cooled off and some trucking companies had to scale back their operations.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how these companies are preparing for the future. With all of the changes we discussed, like, electric trucks, hydrogen fuel cells, autonomous driving.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some pretty big disruptions on the horizon.
They are, and it's interesting to see how different companies are approaching these challenges. Some are embracing these new technologies and investing heavily in research and development, while others are taking a more cautious approach, waiting to see how things play out before making any major commitments.
It's a bit like placing bets.
Yeah.
No one knows for sure which technology will win out in the end.
Right.
So companies have to hedge their bets and make strategic decisions based on their own risk tolerance and market outlook.
That's a great analogy, and it's not just about the technology itself, it's also about the infrastructure and support systems that need to be in place to make these new technologies viable. For example, if electric trucks become the dominant force in the industry, we'll need a robust network of charging stations across the country to keep them running.
And what about hydrogen fuel cells? That seems like an even bigger challenge in terms of infrastructure.
It is. Producing and distributing hydrogen on a large scale is a complex and expensive undertaking, and there's still a lot of technical hurdles to overcome. But some companies are betting that hydrogen will eventually become a major player in the trucking industry, especially for long-haul routes, where battery range might be a limitation for electric trucks.
It's fascinating to think about how the trucking landscape might look in 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, I know, right?
Will we see a mix of electric, hydrogen, and diesel trucks sharing the road? Or will one technology emerge as the clear winner?
It's hard to say for sure, but one thing is certain. The industry is in a state of flux, and the next few years will be crucial in determining its future trajectory.
And I think it's important for us as consumers to be aware of these changes and to understand the impact they might have on our lives. After all, we all rely on the trucking industry to deliver the goods and services that we need.
Absolutely. The choices we make as consumers, from what we buy to how we ship it, can influence the direction the industry takes. For example, if there's a strong demand for sustainable transportation options, that will incentivize trucking companies to invest in cleaner technologies.
So we're not just passive observers. We have a role to play in shaping the future of trucking.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the key takeaways from this deep dive. The trucking industry is not some isolated entity. It's deeply intertwined with our economy, our environment, and our daily lives.
As we've seen, it's an industry that's facing some significant challenges, but also some exciting opportunities. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
I agree. It's a dynamic and evolving landscape, and one that deserves our attention and consideration.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've explored the complexities of the trucking industry, from the economics of trucking to the technology that's shaping its future. And of course, the human element, the truck drivers themselves.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope our listeners have gained a deeper appreciation for the crucial role that trucking plays in our world.
I hope so too. And I think the biggest takeaway is that the future of trucking is not predetermined. It's something that we as a society have a hand in shaping.
So the next time you see a semi-truck on the highway, remember that it's more than just a vehicle. It's a symbol of our interconnected world and a reminder of the complex forces that drive our economy and our daily lives.
Well said. And with that, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration into the world around us.